ourselves and just sort of say what our interest is and so forth. I'm Matt Juros. My company is Fishbrook Design Studio. We're on Wingate Street.
Stephanie Guyett, I'm the Associate Director here at the UMass Lowell Innovation Hub.
I'm Bill Shaheen. I run a CPA firm in North Andover, Mass.
I'm Peter Shaheen. I'm an attorney from North Andover, Mass.
Bob Gorman, I'm just an independent investor.
Darlene Beal, Executive Director of HC Media. We have space downstairs and on 60 on the street.
Michelle Van Ravenstein, photo factory, operate and own photo factory downtown in Washington Square.
I'm Pam Frotton. I'm the studio manager at the Yoga Tree for Caroline, and here in support of STEM.
I'm Amanda Smith, also from the Yoga Tree and in support of STEM.
Carol McHale from the Yoga Tree.
Kevin Dorr, a security consultant from Sound Judgment Solutions. I've joined Caroline's team recently.
I'm Nate Robertson. I work for an economic development partnership between the City of Haverhill and the Greater Haverhill Foundation.
I'm Will Luzier. I'm the Director of Compliance at Toodster and advising Caroline on the licensing process.
I am Caroline Pineau. I'm owner of the Yoga Tree and founder of STEM.
I'm Vanessa Henry, Community Coordinator of Large Boston North on Wingate Street.
I'm Elaine Barker. I own Pit and Potpourri here in Haverhill, and I'm just very interested in what's going on.
And Matt already introduced me. I'm Seth. So.
And we had
Common Catalyst. And just joining us is Councilor Page.
Thank you.
Colin.
Just a point of order, we are broadcasting today live on YouTube. So just FYI and fair notice.
awesome. No pressure.
Yeah. Let's see if I had known that, I would have gotten a haircut. If that was possible. Okay, great. Welcome. Thanks for coming from across the river, down the street a little bit. We appreciate that a lot and in support as well. We have one agenda item that's important for us to cover before we get on to the presentation of a local business that is being hatched here in Haverhill, and I would be interested to hear what Caroline's got going. Full disclosure, I already know exactly what she's got going. We're doing design work together. So one of the things that we've done as a group is look at promoting and creating an identity and brand for downtown Haverhill in order to attract investment in other businesses and sort of help coalesce as an economic ecosystem in Haverhill. And you know, we looked at hiring branding consultants and PR firms to figure out sort of and do group studies and focus sessions to figure out who we are, what the market needs, who we want to be, and how to get that word out there. And we decided that instead of doing that type of very traditional route, who we are really has a lot to do with business and culture as it's evolving sort of just beyond the horizon that we can see. This is really an area that's becoming. And so rather than trying to establish an idea of what we are that we can see, we want to help figure out what we're becoming and help shape that. We've been doing that with a series of what we're calling creative industry nights, which are just events where we're targeting a particular type of business or business culture that we see in Haverhill that we think we might be able to build on. And we have had two so far, themed the evening around the industry, have speakers, thought leaders, come invite folks from in town and out of town, and at the end have a party. And they've been well attended. The last one that we had was Creative Industry Night 2 music theme, and we had Brooklyn-based hip hop producer and Brooklyn Hip Hop Festival promoter and now Emerson professor Wes Jackson come as our keynote speaker, and he put on a tremendously inspirational and informative talk about how to do business in the music industry and how to do take what is considered sort of a talent-based entertainment experience and look at it as a business. We sort of polled and targeted not quite a dozen businesses that are centered around music in downtown Haverhill. We visited a couple of them after Wes's talk, including Coco Brown, which is an event space up on Washington Street, where we had two local inspired spoken word performers and performing for us. We walked down the street. We weren't able to connect with the recording studio that apparently had a session going on, although they were on our agenda. And we ended up at the Barking Dog, where the Imagine Music Studio had two different groups of student musicians perform for us, and they were followed by their teachers, whose group is the Merrimack Delta Dove Set. And they blew the roof off the place, and they're still repairing the roof, as far as I know. So that's sort of the summary of what went on, and I wanted to just sort of go around the folks that were there. And one of the things I think we need to do is more effectively capture these events for social media, and so that we can sort of market and collect what we've discovered about ourselves and sort of turn that into an identity. We hired Scott Cody to photograph the event, so we got some really great pictures of people and things going on. So that's something we'll in the subcommittee for events will huddle and figure out how to get we don't want to put this out in a disorganized fashion. So what we want to do is select the platforms that we're going to put out our identity on, create that identity, make it consistent, and then regularize our posts to those. So sort of a process everywhere. So that's my report. Stephanie and Seth, do you have any other input?
Well, we had about, 60 to 70 people. I forget exactly how many we got signed in, but people kind of trickled in and out. I think what we found works at these events is like going to multiple places. So we start somewhere and we end up somewhere else. So you get this walking, talking, aspect where you interact with other people, you're moving, you're not just like seated in the same room the whole time. And we've done that with both events, and that's worked really well. We jammed a lot in, and we couldn't make it all quite work at this last event. So just something we got to think about as we go forward. But we pulled it off. Mind you, we had no budget. We had nothing. I think we spent $200. And we pulled off this great event. I mean, we had lighting, we had an amazing tech setup by Seth, and just a lot of really cool stuff that if you were there, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you didn't, you have to make sure you come to the next one.
So we're targeting another one in probably early spring. Theme to be determined, but we're open to suggestions. We also have a subcommittee for these events that is meeting, so come join us. I mean, that group sort of expanded after the first event, and we got a lot of it. Hey.
It's
not yours.
The photographs are. I mean, really good.
We know why you like the photography.
Yeah.
Just took photos of Matt.
I had to trim them down. They were a lot.
But so we're looking for more energy and input for the next session,
And one thing that really struck me, we had a diverse group. We had all ages. We had everybody represented. It was just really nice. We, Vanessa's brought some of the disabled people that she works with and from Leonard. It just was really nice, welcoming, and each spot had its own kind of little welcoming feel to it, whether it was, the talk at the tap, the live spoken word poetry at Coco Brown, and then music at Barking Dog. It was really nice to see all of Haverhill kind of really nicely represented at an event.
and this is part of our hope with Haverhill.biz is to make our group look like Haverhill and act like Haverhill, and so this event I think did that well, and in some place that's sort of a theme that we want to continue with. And
And just really the generosity of like the tap opened the doors for us, the barking dog, Ben at Be Imagined brought all his equipment, did set up the bands, brought his 2 student bands. Wes Jackson came up here from Boston, then was going back to New York the next day, didn't ask for a thing. We didn't give him anything. I mean, we had nothing. So all of that, I think I bought him a drink at the barking dog. That was about it. So that just kind of shows you the spirit, I think, of Haverhill, that all these people, you know, we like threw it out there and people jumped to get involved. It's very exciting.
And this event too is part of the an overall approach that we want to continue to promote, is that, you know, as we figure out who we are and claim our identity, the idea isn't so much that we're going to compare ourselves to Lowell, you know, or Amesbury, which are fabulous places, and we have our place, you know, next to Lawrence and on the river. But what's important is we compare ourselves to what's going on in Brooklyn, West, in Stuttgart, with, you know, in places that are just as you know, proximate by a mouse click as our geographic neighbors are, because that's where business is going and that's where culture is going. So as we're figuring ourselves out, we want to expand our vision, you know, sort of past those horizons. This has been sort of a good next step.
The woman that was the founder of Mass Innovation Nights.
Bobby Carlton, yeah.
Yeah, I had her on my podcast at an event last week. I talked to her about this event. She's extremely interested in what we're doing and willing to help in some way, anyway. We don't know what it is just yet, but she does. She founded Mass Innovation Nights. She founded Innovation Women, which is a portal for finding women speakers for events. She's definitely interested. She knows that this is a very inexpensive, probably free thing that she would be doing, but she's interested and kind of waiting for some ask from us.
Say her name again.
Her name is Bobby Carlton.
Bobby, right. So I had just gone to Mass Innovation Jam 15 at District Hall a couple of weeks before we did our event, and we grabbed wisdom from how she puts that on.
Oh yeah.
There's already a real synergy. We should follow up on that.
And they're going to be here because we're going to do another Mass Innovation Night in 2019 with
Excellent.
Bobby. So that's already on the calendar.
Yeah.
Exact
and
date to be determined. But
There's
we're already
one
booked.
next week in Lincoln.
Yeah.
Mass Innovation Night. So I'm going to try to go. I think it would be cool for, you know, people that represent Haverhill.biz and this event series. If people could go, it would be good to go, just to show support for what she's doing. I'd love to go to her with an ask, and maybe the ask is how, you know, maybe give us an insight into how to turn events into something through social media, or maybe the ask is, would you speak at an event? I don't know, but I think the next step is probably
She spoke
taking
at
advantage of
the
her
chamber
interest.
at a chamber event last year.
Yeah,
as well.
she's
been
into
up
it.
here. She's in this area. She's
good.
She's great.
And it would be great to have sort of Haverhill.biz show up at the next Mass Innovation Night. And it's next Tuesday, and so you should only go to that if you're not already going to go to the city council hearing and support Caroline, which is a good segue. So Caroline is a business owner who runs Yoga Tree, Caroline Pineau. And the age of that business is
8 years.
8 years. Solid, community-oriented, has stretched me in more ways than I thought I could be. And is hatching a new venture. And so just because of who we are, we'd like to offer the microphone to people who are out, you know, hatching new ventures, to tell us what they're about, to give us the opportunity as fellow business owners and investors and property owners, to throw darts, ask questions, and figure out how our ecosystem is evolving and so forth. So, Caroline.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you guys so much for coming today. It's my first time with a clicker, so we'll see how it goes. First and foremost, I know many of you in this room, but for those of you I don't know, I own the Yoga Tree down on Washington Street, and I'm working on my next venture, which is STEM, a proposed adult use marijuana dispensary in downtown Haverhill. And I recognize that cannabis, marijuana is a very polarizing topic, and it creates a lot of healthy discussion. And I would like today to be interactive. So if you have any questions that you want to ask throughout the presentation, please feel free. I'll introduce some members of my team in a moment that can also help to answer some of those questions. So Jim Borghesani could not be here today, but he's my director of communication. Jim is the former campaign communication director for the Yes on 4 campaign to legalize marijuana. And his colleague, Will Luzier, is here, and he's my compliance director. He also worked with the Yes on 4 campaign as the campaign manager. Adam Pineau is my husband. He's our head of technology. Adam works in the commercial and private security space in technology. Former Police Lieutenant Kevin Dorr, he served on the Haverhill Police Department for 33 years, recently retired, and has started his own security company with a colleague of his from the FBI. So we're really excited to have Kevin on board to be a nice liaison between STEM and the City of Haverhill and help to mitigate any security concerns that might come up. Ted Zanakis, my attorney, could not be here. My counsel, Matt Jaros, my architect, has come up with some wonderful conceptual renderings of our space, which I'll show you in a moment. But that's been a really fun piece of this project. And then I have three lovely ladies over here who work with me currently, who I hope to bring on board as three of our first retail specialists once we get opened. And they're all Haverhill residents. So first, I wanted to just go through an overview of the 2017 legislation for cannabis, just to give you a better sense of what the law is all about. It allows adults to possess a limited amount of cannabis, and it also creates the Cannabis Control Commission, which has 5 commissioners to oversee the industry and make sure that any entrepreneur looking to get into the space follows all of the regulations by the state. It requires testing of all cannabis products and includes explicit packaging and labeling requirements on all products. It also gives cities and towns such as Haverhill the power to limit cannabis operations. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. It allows for a 23% total tax, which includes a 6% local option. So that 6% will go back to the City of Haverhill. Public use or driving under the influence remain illegal under this ordinance and under this law. And recreational applications actually began back in the spring for a summer rollout, but as you know, none of the recreational facilities have opened yet, but you'll start to see a few of those opening as soon as at the end of this month. Is that correct, Will?
Hopefully earlier.
Hopefully earlier. Why to support a regulated market? So whether you are someone who is pro-cannabis or anti-cannabis, there are many reasons why you would want to support a regulated market. And 2 of the biggest are from a public safety perspective, because right now criminals are in control of the black market, and we're not introducing anything to our community that's not already here. There is a vibrant black market of cannabis in Haverhill. So in order to tackle that market, you have to regulate a product and you have to tax a product. So hopefully it'll help to mitigate some of these illicit sales and keep dangerous products out of the reach of consumers and provide them with pure, safe, tested products. It also is a huge revenue generator for cities. And I'll go through this more in a moment, but the City of Haverhill could look to acquire around $480,000 per dispensary per year in tax revenue for the city alone. And all of this can go to helping our public school systems, helping our public safety budgets. There's a wide host of things that this money could go to good use to in our city. So although the Cannabis Control Commission has this overarching regulatory body, Haverhill's really in the driver's seat. They can determine the location, time, and manner of all cannabis operations, and they can limit the facilities to 20% of the existing package store licenses, which they are proposing to do in their initial ordinance. So what that means for Haverhill is that they can't limit it to any less than 6 operators. So they have to allow space within the city for 6 potential retail establishments to open. The city can also negotiate host community agreements with a 3% revenue share. So there's a 3% local tax option, as well as an up to 3% community impact fee for a total of 6% that can go back to the City of Haverhill. There's reasonable restrictions on signage. You can't have any window displays, nothing that screams marijuana displayed anywhere in your window. So these are really discreet and sophisticated establishments. And they also restrict access to 21 and up. And so no one underage can get into these facilities, whereas the black market currently, criminals aren't checking IDs. So unfortunately, product is getting into the hands of the youth. I wanted to show you one legal cannabis tax model, just so that you can further understand where this tax dollar is coming from, where I'm getting these figures. In Massachusetts, the medical marijuana sales average 8 million per store annually, and that's based on a very fixed consumer base of about 52,500 consumers. I think the most recent number that I've gotten for cannabis consumers is 1.6 million. So you can see that the consumer base is much larger for an adult use retail space. So you could expect that there'd be greater sales for adult use cannabis. But even at this $8 million figure, with the local share percent of 6%, that's where you get the $480,000. And that also doesn't include the property taxes that these businesses are paying back to the community. It doesn't include any of the other ancillary benefits to helping with local construction, electrical, HVAC, and new area businesses, as well as new jobs. And you can see that that 480,000 is right up there with some of the largest taxpayers in Haverhill. So hopefully a significant contributor to the economic engine in Haverhill. These stores have a tremendous amount of security, far more than you would see at a liquor store or at a pharmacy. And they're probably more safe than your average bank. That's how regulated the security is for this industry. There's a partitioned vestibule with a security guard, which we hope to still make very inviting. There's a second ID check at the point of sale. So after they go through the first vestibule, and I'll show you this all in play in a moment, they have to get their IDs checked a second time. There's complete background checks on all employees. There's surveillance cameras in the vestibule, sales area, and all of the product storage areas. External perimeter cameras, and there's even a direct link alarm system back to the police department should you need it. There's also product delivery seed to sale protocols, which means that from the inception of a cannabis plant, from the seed all the way through its growth, through its transport to a dispensary, that product has been tracked very strategically to make sure that what you're getting is safe and secure. What will cannabis stores look like? I think there's this misconception that cannabis will scream, have loud, obnoxious advertising like potentially a liquor store or a head shop that sells paraphernalia. But it actually, so it won't look like that. It won't look like a liquor store with, won't look like that. It won't look like a head shop with, smoking apparatuses in the window. It'll look something much more like this. That's very discreet, really fits in with the streetscape. This is actually a dispensary in Brookline, Netta, which from the average passerby, you wouldn't even know that this is a dispensary.
It's a former bank.
It's former bank, yeah. And I had a visual of the inside, which I think I took out, but it's a beautiful interior. And this is just another interior. All product is locked in sealed containers until the point of sale, at which point you take the product home with you in child-proof, nondescript packaging. So the visual impact is really discreet and sophisticated. As I mentioned, there's no window displays. There's no product depictions anywhere in the window. There's no cannabis reference in the store name, and there's no public consumption. I think a lot of people think that people are just going to be like walking down the street smoking, which they are already, but there's no public consumption under the law, and it remains illegal. It's always been my vision to integrate or upscale cannabis dispensary in downtown Haverhill. My husband and I visited a couple of dispensaries when we were thinking about opening out in Colorado. And we started to think, how can we get this vision and bring it to life in our home state of Massachusetts and our hometown of Haverhill? And we started to look at all of the possible geographic locations of where a dispensary could open within our city, and kept coming back to that it has to be downtown. It has to be downtown for so many reasons. one, I think it supports a more sophisticated high-end establishment, but it also brings the benefit of increased foot traffic to other downtown businesses. There's new street and perimeter surveillance cameras, which will essentially serve as an extra set of eyes on the street and help local law enforcement, keep an eye on other nefarious behavior that might be in the area. There's revitalized storefront opportunity in our growing downtown. There's easier access for cannabis consumers that live and work downtown. And I would also say that, these types of progressive businesses, cannabis just being one, will hopefully help make the city more enticing to other young professionals. It also can serve as a destination shopping experience. And hopefully these consumers, which on average spend between $80 and $100 per purchase, will then visit our pizza shops, our yoga studios, our restaurants, and hopefully the whole city can thrive from that economic boost. Here's some examples of other downtown locations across the Commonwealth that are embracing downtown zoning. Boston, all retail zoned areas. There's a buffer zone between establishments in the city so that they're not all clumped in one location. Brockton, the mayor has proposed downtown zoning. Holyoke, the mayor has approved downtown zoning. Worcester has approved downtown zoning with buffer zones. Lowell has buffer zones between cannabis establishments. And then these are a few other. Northampton, Wareham, Ayr, Cambridge, and Somerville have all approved downtown zoning. Commercial highway zoning, while I think they will be a fine, lucrative location, is more of a sole product shopping experience where people are looking to just drive, pick up their product, and go. And it doesn't bring any boost to our downtown economy. So it's also difficult for residents in the downtown's apartments and condos to access these locations. They would actually have to physically get in their car and drive. And just as you'd have a CVS in different locations across the community, the same reason would be to have a cannabis dispensary in different zones around the community. It eliminates streetscape improvement and security from our downtown. And it's also a missed opportunity, in my opinion, of attracting young professionals and other really progressive businesses, because I think that's the pulse that's going to continue to move the city of Haverhill forward. Here's an example of a downtown dispensary in Boulder, Colorado. The difference here is you can actually see into the dispensary, whereas Massachusetts has regulations where you can't have line of sight into the dispensary. But you can see it's really high-end, upscale. This is a highway location. So you can just kind of compare and contrast the difference in what these can look and feel like, and how having something like this in our downtown, if done well, can really enhance our downtown streetscape. There's been a lot of public concern and thoughtful questions around this industry, and I wanted to just go through some of those to help mitigate any concerns or perhaps questions that you might be asking. There is this fear that Haverhill, or any city for that matter, that has one of these dispensaries would become known as the cannabis capital of the Merrimack Valley, or the cannabis city. And there's been no evidence of any other cities or towns in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, Nevada becoming known as solely cannabis establishments. If anything, Denver is consistently cited as the most desirable city for business and residential, and is one of the top 10 states for business. There's also been no city or town that has overturned its cannabis decision, except with the exception of one that put it back to ballot, and they lost pretty favorably to keep moving the cannabis industry forward. And that just goes to show that people were nervous that it wasn't going to work, but it's working in all of these communities that have implemented these municipal policies and are embracing this industry. What has happened in other legal states? The fears by opponents have not materialized. So there's been no increase in youth use. There's no increase in motor vehicle OUI deaths or arrests. There's no increase in public safety budgets, no federal intervention, but there's a tremendous amount of new tax revenues for these states. In Colorado, $247 million in 2017. And I can, if anyone is interested in getting any of these studies, I'm happy to share. a state and local regulated system is far better than a black market system. So in an unregulated system, which I already mentioned has 1.6 million adults, there's no safeguards on purity, potency, or personal security when purchasing. And there's up to 1.2 billion in unregulated, untaxed marijuana sales. In a local regulated system, which is what Haverhill is moving towards supporting, is strict rules for licensing and store security, purity testing to make sure that the product that you're getting is safe, portioning and labeling so that you know exactly what's in the product, how strong it is, very clear packaging that is very clear not to appeal in any way that a way that a child might identify with. It restricts underage access, and divergence of minors is crucial. The taxation of all sales can also help to benefit these communities. I wanted to share a little bit more about my application process and the process that I am in with the City of Haverhill, just so that you can better understand the rigorous process required for someone to open one of these stores. It's very difficult for anyone to just set up shop and open one of these facilities. I'm probably about the halfway mark, maybe a little bit further, but I've been working at this now 7 months. I applied back in April for what's known as an economic empowerment classification with the Cannabis Control Commission, and I was thrilled to learn that I was one of 123 in the state that were approved for that priority certification. And what that means is that I've proven a number of criteria, that I live in the community, that I have experience helping to economically develop that community, and that I've served a population of disproportionately impacted people, which Haverhill classifies as being adversely affected by high levels of crime associated with the illegal market. So what that means for my application process is that as soon as I agree to a number of things with the City of Haverhill and I apply for my license, that I jump the pile and go to the top of the list at the state level for priority review. I will negotiate a host community agreement with the City of Haverhill, which we agreed to the time, place, and manner of the operation and what this will really look like and feel like for Haverhill. I'll hold a community meeting and invite people surrounding my proposed establishment to come to the meeting and learn a little bit more. Once I have those two items, the host community agreement and the community meeting under my belt, I will submit 4 very robust packets to the Cannabis Control Commission, which includes an extensive background check on myself, also employees. Once I hear back from the commission with a provisional license, I'll also have to go through a special permitting process with Haverhill. So there's still quite a few steps to get through, but we are well on our way. I've been working with the City Council for a number of months here very closely, and with the Mayor's office, and I'm looking forward to this next step. Oops. It's very important to me to be an upstanding member of the business community. I have a tremendous amount of responsibility that I feel being one of the first to take on this industry in Haverhill to really get this right. I have some wonderful relationships with some local organizations that I hope to continue. I've contributed to for many years at my time at the Yoga Tree, but 2 that I've already worked with specifically on my next venture are the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Haverhill and Emmaus, and I hope to help them with programming and helping with some of the wonderful things that they're doing here in the community. And this is the most exciting part. This is a rendering that Matt Juros has put together with his team over at Fishbrook Design that is more of a proof of concept of what our downtown space could look like that we can retrofit into any downtown location. So you can see from the exterior that the design is very nondescript, but beautiful and welcoming. It doesn't depict any cannabis reference anywhere in that you can see, but instead it displays a beautiful piece of artwork in the window. It's very important for me that the aesthetic is high-end and sophisticated. Once someone decides that they would like to go into the dispensary to check it out, they have to go through a secure vestibule, which is over on the left. And in that vestibule, which is also known as a sally port, a sally trap, they'll be greeted by a security guard, which will check their ID, confirm that they're 21 and up, and that they are of age to enter the space. Once it's been confirmed that they are someone that should be there, and they'll be led into the space. And our concept for the space is really to have it be open concept, much like the Apple Store, with harvest tables around the room. That's Colin LePage right there. I wanted to just put him in there. Yeah.
Thanks.
So you'll be greeted by a knowledgeable sales rep that will really educate you on what you're buying, because a lot of people don't know. They've never been in a dispensary before, and so all of our sales staff will have be able to share educational information with you. Once you buy your product, it will be retrieved from a locked storage area. So it's not until the point of sales that you'll actually pick up your product. Unlike a liquor store where you can go in and put stuff in your basket, this will be different. You'll have stuff that you can look at, perhaps smell, but it won't be until you purchase your product that you have product in hand, at which point you'll then exit the dispensary and consumers will go home and consume in private. So that's my vision for an upscale dispensary in downtown Haverhill. I am so excited to hopefully bring this to life in our city. I think this type of business is the exact type of progressive business that we need to welcome into our community. And I think it can fit really well into the downtown landscape and hopefully drive more consumers into our downtown that will serve as a ripple effect and help some of the other downtown businesses as well. So does anyone have any questions? And please feel free to just ask anything. There's no silly questions.
What are, that was really informative, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I have some questions. What are the types of products that you'll hopefully be able to sell?
So good question. So we'll sell flower products, so the actual marijuana product, flower. Non-flower products, also known as edibles, some of the vape cartridges. So there'll be cookies, brownies, lozenges, medical products, salves, CBD product. Anything else I'm missing?
Tinctures. Some folks sell suppositories. So there's really a whole range of products, only limited by someone's imagination and the manner of ingestion.
And you get them, you don't make or grow anything at this?
Good question. Yeah. So there's how many licenses? 8 or 9 licenses that you can apply for at the state?
There are 9 different kinds of licenses.
9 different kinds of licenses. And so if you're not licensed to grow, you have to buy from a licensed cultivator. So I'm just applying for a retail license, but I have suppliers that I'll purchase, that are licensed suppliers that I'll purchase product from. Yes.
Okay. My last question.
Yeah.
Is it going to have to be cash only because of issues with banks? And
that's a
all
great
this kind of
question. So Century Bank is actually supporting the space. Gardner Federal Credit Union has just come out and said that they're supporting this initiative. And I've actually was one of the first to submit my application with them. And so I'm pursuing a bank account with them. So you will be able to take credit card and debit through that.
And most dispensaries now are either accepting cash or debit cards. And some even have ATMs adjacent to them. If someone doesn't have a debit card, they can use a credit card to get some cash.
Great questions.
Sir, you had a question.
Actually, those were my questions.
I thought you said that something was going to be open before the end of the month, hopefully. Where is someone else ahead of us in the process?
Not in Haverhill, just in the state in general.
Oh,
so the only facilities that have been open are medical, and retail was supposed to roll out over the summer, but there's been some delay, and you'll see the first retail store opening at the end of this month.
There were 2 classes of applicants that were allowed priority status. And the first class was economic empowerment applicants. And the other class was existing registered medical dispensaries that had a provisional license approved by the Department of Public Health. And so there have been 3 retail establishments licensed once the labs are licensed, so that they can have tested the products that those retail establishments will sell. Then those retail establishments will open. So there's one in Northampton, one in Leicester, and one in Wareham that have been licensed to sell retail. And as soon as the labs are licensed, then they will be able to open.
Whose responsibility is it for the testing? Is it the buyer or is it the grower?
Well, at each product stage, and there's a cultivation stage, and those will have to be, all of that product will have to be tested before it goes to market. Then there's the manufacturing stage, which includes the edibles, the vapes, and all that stuff. Those will have to be tested too, but it's the grower and the manufacturer that will be responsible for the testing. The retail establishment will only be responsible for making sure that the consumer knows what the test results have been.
Like a liquor store, the bottle says 80 proof or something. The products that are available will have that designation.
Yes, although it will show more components than just alcohol. It will show at least the 2 major components, which are CBD, cannabidiol, and THC delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. Did I answer your question?
You did. So is the branding, can you brand it yourself or does it come branded?
That's a great question. Some cultivators are allowing for white label opportunities, so you could potentially brand your own through the licensed cultivator, but many of the cultivators will have their own brand and you will sell multiple brands within your dispensary. And it's important to have multiple relationships with different growers, different cultivators, different manufacturers, so that there's a wide array of products. There's also initially in Massachusetts could be a shortage on flower products because the only people that have been able to cultivate thus far have been in the medical space. So they're first filling their retail locations first before working with people such as myself. So I've been fortunate enough through these guys to be connected to some wonderful suppliers that are willing to stock my dispensary full of a wide array of products.
And there have been at least 2 dispensaries. And it's important to understand that the medical dispensaries are vertically integrated. So if you have a license in the medical space, you have a cultivation license, a manufacturing license, and a retail license. And at least 2 of those organizations over the past year have been prohibited from selling because of tainted product. Healthy Farms from Georgetown, and I believe they have a dispensary in Harvard Square, had to shut down for a while because there was some minor pesticides detected in their products. And the same thing happened with a facility in Worcester. And so I just tell you that to explain that it's important to have a wider range of suppliers for a retailer in case one supplier has to shut down for any reason.
And I assume product has to stay within state. You cannot.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
A Colorado grower cannot sell.
Everything that happens in Massachusetts has to stay in Massachusetts.
What grows in Massachusetts gets sold in Massachusetts.
Yes.
Is there anybody else in Haverhill looking to open a retail shop?
I believe there are a few others.
There's others licenses available.
Yeah, I believe that would be a question for the city council, and I don't know. I think there's people probably waiting.
Yeah.
To open. Yeah.
And there's 6 permitted, correct?
There will be up to 6 that they
Right.
can't limit it to any less than that. And I think the exact number is like 5 point something, but they have to round up.
Yeah, and it's important to understand. It can really be limited to less than 6, but if that is something that the city or town wants to do, they have to have a city or town-wide referendum to decide to lower it below 20% of the number of package stores.
What's to limit them from going to 30?
Nothing.
Nothing.
In fact-
That's the 20% factor. that says-
Right,
okay.
right. So as an example, the city of Pittsfield, I believe their limit was 6 or 7, and they decided instead to authorize up to 35.
And
So
I,
you had
yeah.
a question in the back.
Yeah, I've never used any cannabis products, so I don't know anything about it. But I'm supporting this because I think it's gonna be great for Haverhill. And for people that wanna support it, how can we help? Like, what can people do that wanna support it?
That's a great question. You can talk to your city councilors, you can talk to people at the city, the mayor's office, and just tell them that you support downtown zoning. I also have a sheet here that I'll pass around. I have quite a few signatures on the back pages that I got over the course of the summer of other business owners and Haverhill residents that support this. But if you wanted to add your name to that list, that's helpful. And just also helping to spread this knowledge forth into the community, because I think, you know, when people don't understand, there's a very fearful feeling that perhaps this is going to be like the downfall of Haverhill. And I think it's quite the opposite, that if we stand behind this in a and invite this into our community through sound municipal planning and policy, that this can actually be a really beneficial thing for our community, and hopefully also inspire other progressive businesses to call Haverhill their home. So I'll pass this around for those of you that are at the meeting that, you know, would like to sign this. And also you can attend the city council meeting next week. They'll be next Tuesday, the 12th. Is it the 12th or the 13th? The 13th, November the 13th, where they'll be finalizing zoning.
So that they'll be voting next week whether to permit downtown zoning?
So they've already proposed downtown zoning. They've done some great work over the past couple of months. That's a great question. The administrative and finance subcommittee, which Colin is the chair of, has done some great work. They've canvassed all of the zones in Haverhill, and they've come up with 6 or 7 zones that they're considering for downtown zoning. And that recommendation has then gone before the full council. They voted to send it on to the planning board. The planning board has made some recommendations, sent it back to the full council, and hopefully next Tuesday will be the final vote, so that businesses such as myself can then continue forth with their process.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is the exterior and interior design already established? It's very modern and coming from Old Haverhill. How is the historical commission going to approve of something like that? You know, very modern.
Yeah, well, so I'll answer a couple of ways. We can speak specifically about the prototype design that we've done so far, but a word about doing work in new construction in a historic zone. You know, I've been on several historic district commissions, including one in Haverhill here, and have worked with the Landmarks Commission in Boston for decades. And the standard they set in Boston is simply this. The buildings that we look at as historic have been built over a period of many decades and hundreds of years. And if you look at a building that was built 100 years ago, relative to the buildings that were built 200 years ago, the one that was built 100 years ago and today looked groundbreaking and jarring and strange. But we look at them all now as part of history and quaint in different ways. And so it's important to understand that when you're building in a historic area, you have to build in a way that reflects the time that you're building in, or else history won't move forward. And you'll sort of pick a period in time and cause the built fabric to stay there artificially. So, you know, rather than regulating new looking design, you know, in architectural circles, we're kind of fond of saying, don't do crummy design. Do things that are beautiful. Don't be afraid to work in a context in a new way, as long as it's beautiful and it's additive. You know, that's a way to get at it, and that's part of how we're going to look at this in the Historic District Commission for the downtown. Our approach to designing this prototype for downtown Haverhill followed those ideas, and what we wanted to do was create a place that followed the law and followed the guidelines that are laid out by the state, because we can't avoid that. But be something that would also add to the community. The way those guidelines are written, it would be possible to put up a big blank wall with no sign and a little slot that they would open up and, sort of look at you and flash your ID and let you in. And that would cast, and that would be fine. That would be the lowest cost way to get one of these, these things are ATM machines, you could do that, and you could do it to your downtown. And we don't want to do that to our downtown. That's not why, it's not additive to the downtown. So we want to, we feel strongly that it's important to be additive to the downtown. So what we did was we took an amalgamation of the laws and constraints and came up with a model that could work with that and be something that is additive. So what we came up with is something that resembles a sophisticated adult-leaning gallery, art installation, something that offers an aesthetic and something light to the street that is discreet, doesn't necessarily tell you what it is, but you can find your way in. I think 99% of the clients aren't going to walk by and say, "Oh my God, that's the box." So they're going to find it because they search for it, and that's how people will get there. So we need only for people to understand what they're standing in front of. They're searching for it already. So it's, sort of how do we add to the streetscape? How do we create a positive piece of community environment with this discrete, regulated type of retail establishment? That was our challenge, and I think that Caroline, as a business owner, community member, and a client, was already on board with these ideas. I didn't have to do a lot of convincing. We sort of had a lot of "oh my gods, you too" in the initial discussions. But full disclosure, I voted against legalization of adult use marijuana because I was afraid it would really become a mess, and that it wouldn't be possible to regulate it strictly enough so that it, or carefully enough so that it could be a positive to communities. And I didn't feel it was ready for prime time, but it's out. The rest of the world the state decided, and so my response is I'm going to get involved. I'm going to try to do it the right way as I see fit. And Carolyn and I and Will and Jim are fellow travelers in that sense. So there's sort of a lot of concern about how it works with the community and the business community in that prototype. I hope that answers your question.
I don't know, it just seems to just jump out, the front exterior, I just don't think it fits in with the interior, fine, I don't care what happens there, but it's the exterior that just doesn't seem to fit in with the rest. I think it should be softened just a little bit.
That also will not most likely be our final design, just because that was a prototype. So
Right.
it's constantly in flux. But when I get my new one, I'll be sure to show you and see what you think.
It's not only me, I'm thinking of the others.
Yeah.
Where in the downtown again would it be, like?
Well,
near the
there's
yoga tree
there's
or-
two downtown locations. There's proposed by the council. There's one on Merrimack Street and Washington Street up through Essex Street. So once we get through zoning, we will have our location.
Because if it's down this end of the street, it would be fine. It would be really bringing up the, the Merrimack.
Yes.
And with something new and nice.
Yeah.
Should we get on and sort of wrap up with other?
Sure.
Anyone have any other
Last
questions?
chance.
I'll have one.
Yes.
You had all the steps to the process
Yes.
that are remaining. Do
Yes.
you have an estimated time to complete, or any idea what it, I know
Yeah.
you can't be definitive. But
Yeah, that's a great question. Those answers are a bit out of my control, and that's mostly regulatory restrictions that are holding us up at this point. But in a perfect world, if all the stars aligned, potentially March, April timeframe, but maybe a little bit longer than that. But if I could have it my way, it would be March.
Right, okay, thank you. You were great, by the way. That was
Thank you.
fantastic, very informative.
It's very good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for coming. If anyone has any questions, please email me. I also have cards here. If anyone wants to sign the downtown zoning that hasn't had a chance to, we'll pass that around. And thank you for filling out my email list. I will keep you apprised of my process, and I also have a Facebook page if you would like to follow along with what we're up to. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
So we want to be respectful of people's times and get everyone out of here before 1. And so thank you very much for attending. Regular monthly meetings, the first Tuesday at noon right here. Stay in touch via email. Coming.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Great job.
Thank you. Yeah. We'll catch up soon. Yeah. It's nice to see you. Take one of my nicknames to heart. Yeah, it was so fun. I'll call you later.
Good, okay.
Yes, I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you so much for coming. It's so nice to meet you. Yeah.
You don't have to agree.
Yeah.
No.
Thank you.
There's quite a few.